Speaking of monetization, let's talk about one more factor that's certainly affecting marketing today, and that's social media. And I think there's a Facebook panel this afternoon after lunch. We're meeting here in person, right? It's not a bunch of our avatars in Second Life that are sitting here talking, right, and having a virtual discussion. I think the guy from Google mentioned, Facebook and TBWA. Colleen had everybody get on Facebook in the organization. What is the impact of social media today? I mean, given the fact that it can be tough to monetize, I mean, are we seeing this as something tangible, something real that people are worried about and should be worried about? How should we be thinking about this? Maybe Gaston, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, we look at it. We have sort of two filters to look at new media opportunities, and one is strictly kind of traditional metrics around cost per reach, and then the second one is really about engagement value. I think that many brands that were once great that are now in big trouble with the gray hair boards trying to figure out what happened are ones that were paying attention to competition, not paying attention to the consumer. So I think it's important to really understand how do consumers engage with you and your brand and your competitors, and how do you live in that space? I think my reality, the files on my laptop are as real to me as the files on my assistant's manila folders on her desk. So so definitely understanding that your brand needs to exist in both of those places. And then the other opportunity is really just basic economics. If a lot of marketers are concerned about advertising next to user-generated content, and your cost per reach around the right audience is a bargain, do it.
Let me shift the discussion towards the marketing organization and social media in particular. I mean, too often, and I've been in organizations guilty of this, it's, here, look, here's the intern who's 18 years old. They know what they're talking about. So what do you think? And suddenly they become like the expert in the room about social media, right? Mm-hmm. So vis-a-vis marketing organizations specifically in social media, I mean, what are you guys seeing as the ways to make this effective besides, hey, let's go out and start, it's people don't have to graduate. People don't have to go to college anymore. It's like the NBA, right? Let's just hire them straight out of high school because they're young and they're in social media. Right. Or is that...
Don't do that. I won't have a job. Just a point about that. We talk a lot about sort of the proactive end of new media and thinking about putting ads, that kind of thing. There's a reactive part to this as well. And I think this is where the organization comes in is, what happened. So I was talking with Tim Mapes at Delta Airlines, and there was a guy with a video camera on the airline and taped a 4-hour experience on the tarmac where the pilot would come on and say, we'll be taking off in 15 minutes. And then 15 minutes later, he'd say, there's another 15 minutes. And this entire thing was cataloged on YouTube. And he said, that's your CMO. And so the question is, thinking about those sorts of things also I think is equally important, because then you begin to think about, well, okay, how can the CMO, how can the marketing organization impact various customer touch points? Because if one of those touch points goes bad, you could end up with a negative an ad like that, and then the problems begin. So I think there's sort of two sides to it, not just sort of thinking about sort of proactive promotion, but what could be the impact if one of these customer touch points goes bad, and by the way, how can the marketing organization affect decisions in each of those areas so that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's to the same idea. There's kind of first order effects and second order effects, right? And the first order effects are, how do we handle this as a new media channel? Got that? We got to deal with that like everything else. The second order effects is really, again, coming from the internet aspect of it, brands and how you manage brands and what brands mean to people and who controls brands and who actually participates in is changing. And the Facebook type experience is a great way for us to experiment, but really around how do we actually live and start to work in a world where we can't solely control what is done and said about the brand, and how do we engage with that audience. So for us, it's more of an experimentation at this stage. We try a lot of the different stuff on that, but really, from an organization perspective, what it's starting to do is drive an awareness within the organization about how we manage and grow brands is changing moving forward, because it's forcing us to react to things like how do we manage across the touch points, because things that will be talked about aren't necessarily things that the marketing organization was directly responsible for, but clearly is now impacting the brand. So it's driving slowly for us organization awareness and change that'll hopefully be reflected in new skill sets and new profiles about how we actively are able to manage the brand in this kind of changing environment for us.
There may be an unintended consequence or two beyond some of the obvious, and Peter, you'll be aware of some of the results of the recent Forrester work that's done. As marketing organizations have inevitably, and for all the right reasons, I imagine, focused on this fairly new consumer centricity that has to be contended with. There's a concern that the focus is being diverted away from at least two other important constituents. One is the rest of the organization, be it operations or sales, and we've already had the poll about how strong some of the relationships are inside your organizations. The other, I think perhaps even more alarming one is the diversion of attention away from customers. And that, I think, is a very alarming trend that I saw come out of some very recent research. And it's not surprising in many ways. It's not unnatural with everything that technology has enabled you to do as marketers to focus on this one-on-one engagement that seems so critical, so important, and so rapidly changing, for attention to be diverted. And I think there's a bit of an alarm bell ringing there.
I mean, I think that is a great point in terms of how it affects the organization. I think that if you're a marketing organization that's passionate about the customer and you follow the customer and you understand and try to get in their skin and in their head, things like social media would not be a surprise. It's not some weird thing you read about that, hey, Sally, go find out about this. I mean, you would not be surprised with anything that's happened in terms of market shifts if, as an organization, you put your antenna. And I think that a lot of companies need to look at, are they we're ignoring what consumers are saying out, in the ether, or we're monitoring, or actually we're participating. And very few sort of fit in that last bucket. And I think that's really important.